The opinions on Scoop Squad, Truth Squad are those of the hosts and the guests, and not those of WVRC Media. Copyright 2023.
Hey, Charleston, West Virginia. I'm Ashley Switzer, and I'm your host for the Scoop Squad Truth Pod, a podcast that is hyper-focused on city and county politics and government around the great state of West Virginia. And we've got in the studio tonight my executive producer, Ron Hughes. We've got my, what do I call you?
Legal advisor?
Occasional visitor,
JB Akers with Akers Law here in Charleston, West Virginia. We've got Adam. I knew it started with an A. Adam Knopf, our former
city council person.
There I go again. And we've also got a special guest in the studio with us tonight, and we're going to introduce you to her in just a second. But Ron, you want to run down our list of sponsors real quick?
I want to thank our sponsors, and seems like we're always adding a few sponsors here and there, and I think you added one recently.
Yeah. Americans
for Prosperity, Chris Walters with Integrity Insurance on Capitol Street, T Graphics on Buchanan Street on the west side, Eggplant on Bridge Road, Call Ditto Marketing, and then we also give credit to JB Akers, attorney at law.
Always.
On the corner of Courier and Capitol.
I just went to Eggplant this afternoon and got a coach's gift for our swim team coach, and I'm going to put a picture up on the Facebook page later this evening after she opens it, and everybody can see how cute.
I could take a picture of me shaving using the shaving cream I bought.
Well, yeah.
It's really nice stuff.
You could. I'm just not sure that would sell shaving cream. But anyway, so tonight we're going to dig into city politics. We're going to dig into what happened at the city council meeting regarding the needle exchange at the Women's Health Center, as well as the follow-up with the police chief, Tyke Hunt, and that situation, if you've been following that, and I'm sure that you have if you live in Charleston. But first, we have a guest in our studio her name is Donna Rawlison, right? Did I pronounce that correctly? Rawlison. Mm-hmm. She is with Intercessors for America, and she's also the author of 2 books, what I just think is so awesome. And she brought me a copy of each, and I can't wait to read them. So welcome. Thanks for driving here from Braxton County.
Oh, thank you so much, Ashley. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so tell us, Intercessors for America. Explain that to people. What is that organization? What do you guys do?
So Intercessors for America we're in our 50th year. Celebrating. We're actually having a large celebration in November. But intercessors, we intercede on behalf of the issues that are going on in our state and our nation. And
intercede how?
Well, we pray.
Okay.
We use scripture, and that's what makes it very powerful. When you have an issue that is affecting our state or our nation, then we use scripture and pray into it. And as interceders, we feel the heart of God. There's a special connection. And so by doing that, we're able to really pray the heart of God into an issue. Mm-hmm. And so when we see something going really off the tracks, as interceders, we begin to pray about it. And God will guide us and direct us as to better how to pray with that connection that we have with God. Mm-hmm. And then it's really important to us as interceders, especially, but the organization started for the nation. And it started the same year that Roe v. Wade went in and some of these other major issues that was going in.
That was 1973. For those of us that might have been born after that.
Right.
Yeah, that is correct.
So that's when the organization was born.
Some of us were around before there was a Roe v. Wade.
Well, it was 50 years ago when that was going on and other issues that were going on at the time. Mm-hmm. One of the main leaders was Derek Prince. Derek Prince is an amazing leader. He had over 100 books that was written about interceding, about prayer. One of the first books that I read was Shaping History Through Prayer and Fasting. It changed my life. It talked about, through the Bible, the ways that God changed things, developed patterns, developed strategies through prayer and fasting. Mm-hmm. And he even, one of the very first pages was about Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, how he wrote and declared a day of prayer and fasting for the nation, and how it began to change things after that day. So we believe that. We believe that our prayers are powerful when we combine them together, when we come corporately together in our prayer time, then we add fasting to it, and that it just is a recipe for success, a recipe to bring our prayers and petitions to the Lord.
So what are some issues that God has laid on your heart as far as being an intercessor for America? Can you give us like an example of something that you have prayed about, an issue? And I mean, I get I hear what you're saying, and I know what it means to be an intercessor. It means that you maybe are going to God on behalf of a town or a state or a nation or a law.
Yes.
Like, what have you recently gone to God about that He's laid on your heart?
Well, there's many. We have several people directly in my life who are suffering with suicide thoughts and suicide attempts, and from young men, 13, 14 years old, to there's a huge depression issue, a huge oppression issue.
Yes.
And so when that attacks somebody, and I believe that this is a spiritual attack, this is a demonic attack on somebody's thought patterns. And so when you can be able to stand in the gap for that person, and
Who can't pray for themselves, maybe,
they
right?
cannot.
Yeah.
So, and that's scriptural too, because if they're not currently in connection with God, they cannot pray for themselves. So that's up to us as intercessors to be able to stand in the gap for that person and reach the gates of heaven for that individual or for that issue. Addiction's very heavy on our hearts, and one of the books that I wrote is about addiction because we dealt with that personally.
Right.
And so when you're dealing with addiction, and one of the things that we've been praying about with our group that meets together on Monday nights is the fact, which is changing, praise the Lord, that the state of West Virginia holds the highest spot in overdose deaths. We're not happy with that. We're not okay with that. So we've been storming the gates of heaven. And the last report that we saw, that is beginning to change. We're no longer holding that top spot in overdose deaths for the state of West Virginia. And we're claiming victory over that. We believe that our prayers are working in that regard. We believe that when we begin to pray about addiction, and it's not just praying, but it's being active.
Sure.
Having our eyes open to those that are around us. One of the phrases that we picked up in our living in Savannah and going to the AA groups down there was, and the babies that don't have a say in the matter. When you look around and you see the children and the babies that are suffering because mommy and daddy, and a lot of them aren't living with mommy and daddy anymore. They're with grandmas or aunts or uncles or even great-grandmothers. I know several cases. So these are the things that are highly affecting our nation and our state, especially our state.
So do you guys meet in person, or do you meet on Zoom? How does that? Is this an in-person?
We offer an AA meeting.
Okay.
At our church. We have an AA group that meets on Tuesday nights. We've considered doing the Zoom thing. We do direct connections too.
Okay.
We reach out a lot. That's where my husband and I, we are very active. If someone we know, we pick up the phone and we call them.
Yeah.
We go visit. We'll do whatever. We have people that we go to the courts with, that are making the right steps in the right direction and are getting knocked down left and right. So we'll go and stand with them. We'll put our arms around them and stand up for them and say, look, this is what they're making of progress.
Yeah, you guys put your words to action. From what I've heard from you, you don't just talk about these things. You don't just pray about these things. You actually do something about these things. And I want to get into your 2 books here in just a minute, but I do want to talk about the event coming up, the Intercessors for America. There's going to be an event here in Charleston, West Virginia. Am I right?
That is correct.
Tell me about that.
So our main event is a policy and prayer meeting on August the 29th. We start gathering around 8 a.m. and we start at 8:30, but we have a lineup of speakers that are coming in, and they're going to speak about various issues in our state, election integrity, religious freedom. There was an amazing act that just got passed last fall about religious freedom. And everyone that I spoke to about that said it was a God thing, how that got passed in. It sat there on the table for years. We have addiction as a main subject. Some of the issues that are dealing with in our school, gender issues and school choice and things like that. We have special speakers. We have delegates Senator. We have Secretary of State Mac Warner, who's
Okay.
going to be our first speaker. We have a speaker coming in from Maryland. He's the regional director for Aglow International, and he's going to talk about anti-trafficking,
Okay.
anti-human trafficking. That's kind of at the top of the awareness right now. And so he's going to be talking about that.
And that's August 29th at the
August
Capitol.
29th.
And
But
that's
we
a
do.
Tuesday, isn't it?
It is a Tuesday.
I'll be
It's
in
a
school,
Tuesday.
drat.
And we've got several people that aren't able to come because of work, but
Yeah.
we've got a good group that is coming.
Good.
But Monday night, and this is really, I want to really encourage everyone in Charleston. Monday night, we're going to have praise and worship on the Capitol steps, and that starts at 6 o'clock. And we've got a lineup of girl dancers that are coming from All Nations Church. That's going to be just fantastic
Oh,
as
that's
they
fabulous.
open our event. And then we have a variety of groups that are going to be singing, and then our little dynamo, Carolyn Connor, is going to finish out the evening. She's just fantastic.
I was going to say,
Everyone
can you introduce her to some viewers who might, or viewers, for y'all, not much of me,
Oh, you
listeners?
never know. Well, we probably do have
That's
some
it. Yeah, I
cameras
probably still got somebody following
us.
me around here.
Well, I tell you, Carolyn Connor is an icon in Braxton County, but not just in Braxton County, over the entire state.
Because that's where you guys live now.
We live in Braxton County. Yes, we're in Frametown, and but she is just phenomenal. She has been singing her entire life, and she sang with her husband for many years. They traveled the entire nation singing.
Oh, wow.
And then her husband passed away a few years ago, and she's continued on, and she will knock your sock out. I don't know how tall. She's a short little stature, but my goodness, she is a powerhouse.
Well,
She
that
will-
sounds like, I can't
Yes.
wait for that. That
She's
sounds
fantastic.
amazing. Well, that
Yes.
sounds like an awesome event. We'll put up the event dates and times and maybe the schedule of events on our Facebook page. Right, Ron? Can you make a note of that?
Yeah, but you'll have to remind me.
Okay, I will.
Help me.
But
I'm old.
I do want to get to your two books. I'm sitting here looking at your newest book that just came out called Feed People. And then you have a book that you wrote, I don't know how many years ago, Love Wins the Addiction Battle, Steps You Can Take Today to Help a Loved One Through Recovery.
Yes.
Tell me about that first book. How did that first book come about?
Well, I tell you, I had a good push from the Lord on that one. It has been our heart, and it is a kind of a step book.
Okay.
It has some great tools. If you know somebody that's in addiction, if you have a
Because
loved
you all
one,
have dealt with this personally, so you're not coming at this from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, right?
Not at all. My husband suffered an addiction for many years. He and I met. We were both on the wrong path and the wrong direction in life. We met, we got together, we moved to Savannah, Georgia. Shortly after getting to Savannah, Georgia, we found out that this is not going to work in this pattern of addiction. And we got serious. And it took many months in AA and very strict we just had to get serious about it. It became very much a part of our life. And so that's what the book is about. It's some of the tools that I used to help my husband. And he needed that. And, you know, there's people in addiction and they don't have the support that they
Right.
need. And a lot of times, and this is one of the big things that's in the book, a lot of times people want to love their loved one through. And not that love is a bad thing, but tough love is needed. You know, you're supporting their habit instead of restricting it.
Do you mind if I ask what your husband struggled with? And he's sitting in the studio. And do you
Yes.
mind if I ask her?
He has at one point struggled with everything, but down in Savannah it was crack.
Okay.
And he and I both, I was a drinker at the time. We both smoked marijuana, but he had found crack down in Savannah. And he had dealt with issues before, but that was what was available down there and what we were dealing with in Savannah.
Did it start with alcohol or was it with marijuana?
Well, his story, and you do need to have him back sometime
Yes,
to tell
we will,
his full
for
story.
sure.
His story started at a 5-year-old huffing gas. And he's had a very long life of it. And God has snagged him out of some very treacherous territory over his lifetime because now he is a powerful preacher. He is a powerful man of God. But when we were in Savannah, and things that we were dealing with, alcohol was very much a part of our life. marijuana was very much a part of our life. But boy, when this other came in, it was horrible. And we both said, drew a line in the sand and said, this has got to stop. And he went into a day rehab. He was there from 9 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the evening. And every day for 6 weeks, we did that. And so when he got serious and decided to do that, I dumped out the bottle of rum. That was my choice.
Wow.
And we both went down this path together.
Wow.
And
so recovery is possible, isn't it?
amen. Absolutely. Recovery and restoration.
Yeah.
Restoration's very possible.
Yeah.
One of the girls that's going to speak at our event is one that we helped into recovery. And she's a little powerhouse and she's amazing. And after 2.5 years of recovery for herself, she's going to be that example for our meeting. But
well, and we're running short on time, but I know I wanted to talk about your second book too,
Yes.
Feed People. You guys were originally in Savannah, Georgia. You had a dream.
yes,
You had a very powerful dream, which you feel is from God, and you came to Braxton County and you saw your dream. You the manifestation of your dream, the actual building that was in your dream, you happened upon in Braxton County.
Yes.
So you guys picked up and moved to Braxton County. And now that little church you have restored and turned into a place of worship, into a food pantry to feed people.
yes.
And you tell me that people in Braxton County are hurting. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, as we open our pantry and people come through, we listen to the stories. One of the things, part of our pantry, is the ability to minister as they come through. And as I serve in the pantry, my husband floats around and he talks to people and prays with them.
Mm-hmm.
But many times I've heard it over the last 2 months, people's supplements are being completely cut, either eliminated altogether or to where it's just so minimal. And as we all know, you go into the store and can barely buy what you used to be able to buy 2 years ago.
Right.
So they're just really, really hurting. Very difficult to feed families.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got families that come through that have 7 or 8 in their family, from little kids on up. And I can't even imagine the struggle it is to feed. But I got to tell you about the blessing. Let me tell you, Malachi 3:10 tells you, test me in this, the Lord says. If you tithe and you support and you do what I ask you to do, I will pour out such a blessing on you, you will not be able to contain it. And I kid you not, our pantry is so full. Our freezers get so full on pantry day. We get all this retail product that is gathered around the state or around our county from Walmart, Starbucks, and Little Caesars. And our freezers can't hold it on pantry day. Mm-hmm. It overflows out, and I am able to hand out 3 or 4 and even 5 packages of nice cuts of meat to every family. That is sustenance. That is feeding people, and it's powerful to be able to do that. But it's not me. It's all the work of God that is happening in our little church.
Whew. Well, that's powerful.
I'm going to connect you with one of our partners from Calhoun County. She's in charge of website newspaper called the Ridgeview News, and they cross over into Braxton also. But I'm sure she'd love to hear your story and help share that story.
That's what we do here,
well.
right? We make connections and we
share stories.
Yeah, I love that. And I've got a question for you guys when we come back, because we're going to take a break. And then when we come back from the break, if you guys don't mind sticking around to kind of listen to the next conversation, and if you'd like to jump in, I'd love for you to do that. So we'll be right back with the second scoop.
Our sponsors include Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, offering auto, home, life, business, workers' compensation, and pet insurance, which is health insurance for your dogs and cats that covers those specialty foods, illness, surgeries, medications. You can find them at 16 Capitol Street in Charleston, and you can call them at 346-9181. Find them at www.iigwv.com. We're also sponsored by Eggplant on Bridge Road, anything but ordinary. Go to eggplantshop.com. Also by T Graphics on the west side, 312 Buchanan Street. tgraphics.com for screen printing and embroidery. They've been around since 1984. Call them at 345-4816. Also, our latest sponsor is Call Ditto Marketing. Keep your brand moving. Call ditto.com.
Reckless big government policies are putting the American dream out of reach. We all know Washington is broken, but it doesn't have to be. Senator Joe Manchin could be part of the solution if he stood up for West Virginia values. Instead, he voted with Joe Biden on the Inflation Reduction Act, which led to higher taxes, trillions in new spending, and tens of thousands of new IRS agents. Tell Joe Manchin, Mountaineers want real, common sense solutions. To learn more, visit prosperityisimpossible.com. Paid for by Americans for Prosperity.
And we're back with the second scoop of the Truth Squad, about mess that up. So that was a powerful first scoop. I enjoyed it very much. And Ron, you're going to go get Adam, right? At the door. He's at the door.
Oh, maybe I will.
Right?
I don't know.
But we're going to kind of transition into what happened at City Council last night. And we are going to first talk about the first resolution that was on the floor. I've asked my friends to stick around and provide some input as we talk. But last night there was a resolution, and I'm going to tell you right now that meeting was 4 hours long. I don't know. Banging my head against a wall for 4 hours probably would have been less painful than what that was. But it was a very lengthy meeting. And I felt like, JB, I don't know how much you know about it, but I felt like we've heard all of it before. I felt like it was just on a track. I mean, Adam, get on Ron's mic real quick, because we're just talking about the resolution with the needle exchange. And I just told JB that I felt like when I was sitting in there that I was, shuffled back in time 2 years, listening to the same people make the same arguments. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, it was certainly the same people making the same arguments. One of the things I thought was interesting was that none of the proponents of this said exactly why it was a good idea to put this at Greendale and Washington Street versus let's just have this on the west side. Everyone that was a proponent there was part of the needle industry.
Yeah, the Women's Health Center, in case I'll bring them up to speed really quick. I didn't bring them up to speed, but the Women's Health Center wants to open a harm reduction program that includes a syringe service program, which means handing out clean needles to addicts. And the argument is that handing out these clean needles gets the addicts into the door, where you can start building a relationship with them, and then hopefully transition them into recovery. They also claim that it helps to minimize the spread of infectious diseases. And so they have, and just to preface this, because I only bring it up because the director of the health center said this when we were at her public meeting, that they can no longer provide abortion services. So this is another way that they can help, another revenue stream that they can continue to help the community with. So that's the background on that.
Yeah, so everyone that was there that spoke for it is, either part of the harm reduction industry or, part of academia that focuses on public health. And everyone that spoke against it, either lived in the immediate vicinity or owned a business in the immediate vicinity, and
right.
Said that they were going to incur extra, security costs. That they were afraid about, cleaning up extra litter, to put it politely, but feces or other bodily fluids, and didn't want to have to go through all that. And then, strangely, a lot of the proponents, treated it as some sort of social justice or racial agenda, which I didn't understand. In one way, they said that. Everyone, that users, we shouldn't be basing them on race, and that everybody uses it and it's everywhere. And then, the very next sentence coming out of their mouth is that, well, we need to help people of color. And it's like, well,
right.
What is the goal here? Is this, a social or racial justice agenda, or,
right.
Or are we trying to help everyone as some matter of public health? It was strange.
What I don't understand is they already have a program at HealthRight. Is that
on the
not
east
correct?
end of Charleston? Yes, they do.
And they're giving away
15 needles a day, 10 to 15 needles a day at HealthRight.
Okay. So is there that much more of a need?
10 to 15 participants per day.
Yes. Well, they said needles. They said 10 to 15 needles, but
It's got to be more than that. Needles. I mean, obviously, I could be wrong.
well, here's the thing: if you're only giving away 10 to 15 needles a day, in my mind, is it a program that's necessary? Is that
I think CVS gives out way more than that.
It's got to be that. I would assume that's participants. I could be wrong. I didn't get their numbers.
Yeah.
But I mean, each participant would generally get, several dozen needles when they would get, and then have to bring it back as part of the exchange. I mean, if they only give out 10 to 15, that's like one person. So I don't know.
right? I don't know either. I thought I heard needles, but I could have. It was a long night. It'd been a long night.
Well, one thing
yeah.
one thing Adam said a minute ago is it's a classic example of what we've been going through at an accelerated pace, which is this intersectionality, which is a term that came from academia, which is you try to tie everything to some social issue or cause, so that drug use all of a sudden becomes about race, and if you are against a particular substance abuse program, then you're a racist. Or all of a sudden drug use becomes about homophobia. So if you think the needle exchange program could be harmful to the community, they'll say that you're homophobic. So that's where the intersectionality comes in, where you try to tie all this to some particular marginalized group, so that people are afraid to speak out, because then all of a sudden if you say, hey, this program looks like it might not be good, then they can accuse you of being bigoted against a particular group. And your response is, look, that's not what my debate
No, but
is.
that's their form of marketing, and it's been very effective.
Or they say you have blood on your hands and you want people to die.
Yeah. Well, this, and they speak, this is the same thing. I feel like we're caught in a loop.
I know. I'm telling you.
I can't believe we're still talking about this.
I cannot believe this was happening. And yeah, go ahead, JB.
Well, you also heard last night where people who come in, the proponents in general, speak in very broad terms, and they use generalities where they say things like their studies show that a syringe service program or needle program reduces infection rates and saves lives. And those are just general statements they make.
Right.
Well, there are some programs where there have been positive results found, which is how these began to grow in the first place, but they don't all result in positive outcomes.
Right.
And one of the best examples of that was, the Canal Charleston Health Department program we had here in Charleston that closed its own doors rather than change its rules back in 2018. And that program absolutely was a disaster. So, could a good program in theory help certain people? I'm not going to say that it can. I think that it potentially could if it gets them on a pathway to recovery, which is what these should be built for, not just perpetually passing out needles,
right.
Which they can't do. But this one we had here in Charleston, if people remember, I feel like I'm having to repeat
I know.
the same stuff.
But people don't know, man.
Yeah.
Some people don't know.
Yeah, the one we had in the Canal Charleston Health Department, not Health Right, which is apparently doing a good job and follows the rules. The one we had at the health department that closed its own doors versus changing its rules to comply with the law, and I'm the one who got this information back then, because this was also highly politicized, and it was either you support the health department's needle exchange or you're a bad person. Right. So I said, well, let's look and see what the numbers are, because there were so many community complaints, but nobody had ever actually requested information from them.
Right.
I'm not patting myself in the back, but I was the first person who did that through a FOIA. And they self-reported back in 2018 that they'd had over 6,000 program participants in 2 years, and they could not document one successful referral to treatment. And when you looked at their program manual, they had 4 program goals. The first was reduce infectious disease, which is an admirable goal. We don't want people to get infections and die. Mm-hmm. But the second program goal was to get people on a pathway to recovery, because eventually, I've said this probably 1,000 times by now, if someone keeps using heroin or meth, you are going to kill them.
Right.
I mean, I don't care how many clean needles you give someone, they are eventually going to die. And the studies also show, if we believe in the science, I'm doing air quotes for the podcast, even people who participate in a good syringe service program or needle exchange, the majority of them eventually still use a dirty needle. They still, because you're not in a rational state of mind.
Right.
You're eventually going to reach over and grab someone else's syringe that's just been used. So even if you're in a robust syringe service program, you're eventually, the numbers still going to use a dirty needle, and you're eventually going to overdose. You can't live perpetually using heroin or meth.
Right.
So, the health department program we had, over 6,000 people ran through it, not one successful treatment referral, and they were literally pushing people through at a rate of one person every 60 seconds is what they were doing. So they were not getting any proper attention, and that was one of the big questions I had with the Women's Health Center was, what's your treatment referral going to be? Because we don't have any new treatment programs here. And so are you just going to hand out needles again like we did last time, needles and some supplies?
Did you get an answer?
I mean, I never asked them that question, but the people in the council...
Did they say, Adam?
Yeah, they said that they would be offering wraparound services, but never said where.
Well, I mean, where's the treatment?
Well, there is a thought among some city council members, and this was brought up by Councilmember Janine Rose Fegri, was that they were supposedly going to all be invited to go to Cabin Creek's new or soon-to-be facility at the old, for people that know the West Side level, the old Kroger or the old
Post
post
office.
office down on the flat. So apparently, this was the Women's Health Center was going to just invite
Refer to
everyone
Cabin
for treatment,
Creek.
to go to Cabin Creek.
And what's the problem with that, JB?
Well, one of the problems with that is if you look at the history, the former director of the Canal Charleston Health Department's needle exchange program, when he left there, he took a few other positions. He was working at WVU and did some other things, but then he eventually wound up being the director of Cabin Creek Health, which is where he went. And then some of the people who supported him at that facility wound up starting the SOAR program here in
Right.
Charleston, which is now infamous because it's what led to a big controversy a couple of years ago because they were operating really behind the shadows and they weren't being upfront about what they were doing.
Well, they were operating illegally.
Who was that director? Do you remember?
That was Michael Brumage was the director. He was the health department medical director. Then he eventually wound up at Cabin Creek, and he's gone now. I think he's in Alaska. But some of the people who worked at Cabin Creek with him were involved in SOAR. One's on city council now.
Right.
And so you have these tie-ins where
It's a network, right?
It's the same.
They
people,
feed each other?
It's the same people repeatedly. And these harm reduction programs. Let me be real fast with this.
Okay.
One of the really nefarious things you see here, and it's really comparable to what you saw during the opioid epidemic, where you had a big corporation like Purdue Pharma that got people addicted to opioids, and then they could never get off, and their life is destroyed on the front end because of that addiction. This harm reduction stuff is working the same way, but on the back end, because some of the most significant donors to harm reduction programs, again, I'm doing air quotes for harm reduction. Some of the most significant donors are big pharma companies. The companies that manufacture HIV and Hep C medications literally donate millions of dollars.
Narcan?
I'm not sure. It could be. I'm not
I
sure.
don't know.
I don't know. But anyways, Hep C and HIV manufacturers for sure donate millions of dollars to propagate harm reduction programs. And now the standards have changed where treatment is no longer a program goal or a quote unquote best practice. So it really is just passing out needles, which is it's a perpetual use of drugs, which again, eventually you're either going to overdose, you're going to get HIV, you're going to get Hep C or myocarditis. So big pharma on the back end is making money off Hep C, HIV medications, for example, the same way big pharma made money on the front end by getting people addicted to opioids. So it's a sick and twisted cycle where now things have sort of reversed. And these people who are activists supporting these harm reduction programs are actually getting money from big pharma. That's who's funding a lot of these programs. And there was one in Virginia that was coming here and helping SOAR, and all their money, the one in Virginia, was all coming from big pharma, or primarily. They were getting they've got like $500,000 in donations in one fell swoop from big pharma, and they were coming here and helping SOAR when they were in Charleston. So that's another thing people don't realize.
They're preying. It looks to me like they're preying on people with addiction.
Not the good kind of praying.
No, they're not like Donna Rollison's praying and intercessing. They are literally.
Well, I think one of the things I'd like to point out is that as experienced it, as a former council member, from last term, and then how the vote went today, which was, pretty much just the same, opposition and same proponents. Was that it is a small but very vocal minority that's pushing this, and a lot of them do have financial interests, whether it's in academia or as part of the harm reduction industry. But if you go into the weeds and you break down how individual city council members voted, and a majority of at-large council members voted for the needle exchange, and that was almost the majority of the votes that they got, and. The majority
Was
of
there
no
one
votes
that
were
didn't?
from ward. Well, there's 6 of them, and 4 of them voted for it. And only 2 voted against it.
And what does that say to you?
And so it says to me that if you're a proponent of this and you want, let's say you work, in that industry and you want these kind of programs because you are going to get a donation or you think you're going to be able to get more grants. It's very easy to go after these 6 at-large city council people that don't represent any particular geographic or area or anything. You're like, I can go get these 6, and that'll be a majority of that type, and they're going to have a lot of influence because they have a big voice.
Right.
Whereas if you think, wow, I have to go convince 20 ward representatives.
Right.
that this is a good program. I don't think that's going to happen, and that's how I think the vote went down, was that a majority of city council ward representatives, the people
Voted
that,
no.
the majority, the people that
They heard from their constituents too,
that represent
right?
their constituents and not special interest or lobbying groups.
Right.
Said, what, I'm sure that Janine Rose Fagery and or Michael Farrell, the wards that would be around there don't want this,
Right.
And I wouldn't want it in mine, so
Right.
I'm gonna support them and vote no.
Right.
Didn't you think it was insulting when one of the speakers stood up and said that she was saying that there are quote unquote basically myths about what needle programs bring into the community, and one was it will bring in people who sell drugs into the community, and then she said that's not true. There are people who sell drugs in the West Side already right now, and I'm like, holy cow, that is insulting. I mean, I'm
Wow.
not saying no one sells drugs in the West Side, just like
Yeah.
but you can probably find as many drugs in South Hills, frankly,
Right.
or
Well,
other
Joe,
parts of the
Joe
city.
Solomon sent out an email today. He said, we have over 30 years of research that tells us that syringe service programs save lives. These programs reduce rates of HIV and hepatitis C. And then he says, to boot, these programs do not increase litter, crime, or drug use, while they also spike the chances of neighbors seeking recovery resources. Like, just because you say something, where's your data?
Well,
How can you just say it doesn't increase crime, it doesn't increase litter, it doesn't increase drug use?
Well, I mean, again, they'll pick out a couple, they're experts. You can find an expert in any issue. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I try cases. Both sides have experts in every case. You hope they're all good and being honest, but you can find experts for anything, and there are experts who disagree with what he said. Now, again, you can have a very solidly run syringe service program if it's very tightly controlled, and
Yeah.
I would say some of those can have some positive outcomes if it's a treatment referral program. But what he said is just a general statement. It has been proven in other studies that are credible from large academic institutions that other syringe service programs increase crime and needle litter, and it happened here in Charleston.
Well, and you know what?
It
Forget
happened
this.
here.
Forget the studies. The people that live on the West Side see an increase in crime.
It happened
They see
here.
an increase in needle litter.
Yeah,
They see an increase in drug use, and they're telling you that's what they see. And they're saying, no, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's very disappointing
crazy.
to hear that from Joe Solomon, because literally, of the people that spoke against it, people affiliated, speaking for Gresham's and Sedero's,
Right. Businesses.
literally said, that they're, picking up, human feces, and they feel like they're living in a fortress because they have to have all this extra fencing and all this extra security. And they literally said it did not, these kind of concerns did not start until the Canal Charleston Health Department began their needle program.
Well, do you all not remember? And again, I got this email. I'm once again taking credit for something. But it's 5 years old now. But I got an email from that Michael Brumage wrote, the former director of the Canal Charleston Health Department, where another employee of his in their syringe service or needle exchange program wrote him and said something basically about how, should we go out and acknowledge there's a needle litter program and start getting people to help clean up and volunteering to help with the situation. They were getting complaints. This was her documented email saying we're getting calls every day
Right.
about needle litter complaints. The mall's having issues. She's telling him we're getting calls every day. And his response in one of these emails, I still have in writing, basically
The
was,
studies say?
Well, no. He responded to his employee and said, why would we talk about this publicly? I'm paraphrasing, but that would be stupid because it would point the finger right back at us, essentially is what he said. So his own employee told him they were getting daily complaints, and he said, we're not going to talk about this in public. So again, if someone wants to say that these programs don't cause these issues, my response is, absolutely a bad program does, because we saw it here with our own eyes.
Right.
And that's the reason why it became a controversy. And for people like, Mr. Solomon, if he wants to disagree, he can go back. City Council unanimously, and I was present for this vote, we all supported it. City Council unanimously supported the creation of a needle exchange program at the Canal Charleston Health Department in 2016. It took 2 years for it to be such a disaster that the action was taken to try to revamp it, and then it closed its own doors. So this wasn't something we just were making up and pretending like happened. It was real. We had this initially came from firefighters saying that when they were going to burning houses, when they had to crawl on their hands and knees to get under the smoke, they were crawling through needle litter. That's where the first complaints came from, were firefighters. This was not a myth.
No. But there's nothing to see here, folks. None of that happens. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
And if they were really concerned, I think they would look at the retractable needles, which aren't that more expensive.
Right.
And if they were really concerned about helping, they would, instead of just pushing any old needle.
Or maybe if they were really
they would spend a
concerned-
little extra to get the retractable needles.
Maybe if they were really concerned, they'd be pushing abstinence-based programs. And we're going to have to take a break. And I want to come back and I want to ask our friends who are in the studio one question before we move on to some other important city
We've got some important updates on the regional jail system.
and the top cop here in Charleston as well. So we'll be right back.
Reckless big government policies are putting the American dream out of reach. We all know Washington is broken, but it doesn't have to be. Senator Joe Manchin could be part of the solution if he stood up for West Virginia values. Instead, he voted with Joe Biden on the Inflation Reduction Act, which led to higher taxes, trillions in new spending, and tens of thousands of new IRS agents. Tell Joe Manchin, Mountaineers want real, common sense solutions. To learn more, visit prosperityispossible.com. Paid for by Americans for Prosperity.
Our sponsors include Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, offering auto, home, life, business, workers' compensation, and pet insurance, which is health insurance for your dogs and cats that covers those specialty foods, illness, surgeries, medications. You can find them at 16 Capitol Street in Charleston, and you can call them at 346-9181. Find them at www.iigwv.com. We're also sponsored by Eggplant on Bridge Road, anything but ordinary. Go to eggplantshop.com. Also by T Graphics on the west side, 312 Buchanan Street. tgraphics.com for screen printing and embroidery. They've been around since 1984. Call them at 345-4816. Also, our latest sponsor is Call Ditto Marketing. Keep your brand moving. Call ditto.com.
And you're back with the third scoop of the Scoop Squad Truth Pod. And that music just really throws me off. I'm going to get used to it. I'll do better next time. All right, so we're back with our guests, and we've got Donna Rollison, we've got J.B. Akers, we've got Ron Hughes, and we've got Adam Knopf over there. But I wanted to ask you guys. You guys have both have your own personal experience with recovery. When you hear harm reduction, when you hear syringe service program, when you hear that people are handing out needles and drug paraphernalia, not only the needles, the spoons, the heat source, all those things. What do you think?
Well, it's just ridiculous. It is. There's nothing behind it that is intended for recovery. There's nothing behind it that is actually intended to hurt, to help someone. It is intended to keep them in the habit. What you said earlier, that one of the arguments was, oh, we'll bring them in and build a relationship with them. No, you're not going to do that in that environment. What you do is when they're really seeking recovery, and that's the problem. I would guarantee you, and I've met enough in recovery, enough addicts that are not in recovery, they are not happy with their life. They do not want to be there, but they are so stuck.
Yeah.
And that's keeping them stuck. Mm-hmm. That is not giving them a hope and a future. That is keeping them right where they're at. And he said it perfectly. This is all about the money. This is all, there's money behind all of this. And the big pharma and these other organizations, that's where it leads to. It all goes back to the money. But this is not a source of help.
I mean, can I just say something else real quickly?
Yeah.
I mean, again, you feel like you're a crazy person when you talk about this issue. Mm-hmm. Because you have, for example, there was a woman who came down here from Toronto a couple years ago, and Toronto had the first harm reduction program in North America 20 plus years ago. And she comes in and says at a public meeting, they brought her down here to support harm reduction, and she said that, the overdoses were so bad in Toronto that they needed to start considering things like just legalizing all recreational drug use.
Right.
So my thought, I mean, it's right in your face. I'm
crazy.
thinking, well, if harm reduction is leading to better outcomes, then how are your outcomes getting worse? And Toronto's overdose rate is as bad as West Virginia's. So even with the most robust, and they actually have, they've got everything, including up to this public injection sites in Toronto. They're as far left as you can be.
Right.
Their outcomes keep getting worse. So what they do is they create an environment where they create a problem, and then they say, we're the only ones who could save you. And then so you feel like you're a crazy person because you're like, we keep trying all this stuff and nothing works. And, we want to talk about evidence-based stuff. That's a hugely popular phrase in this industry, is evidence-based science, right? I actually called the former, they called him the czar of I can't remember what his exact title was, but he was in Baltimore, Maryland, and he oversaw their harm reduction in Baltimore. And Baltimore had the first harm reduction program in the United States. And I talked to him at length, and he said, look, harm reduction programs, in his opinion, and he was a former addict himself, a substance abuser, and he was in recovery.
Right.
He said harm reduction can reduce infectious diseases. He said, I think that is true. He said, up to a point where only if they stop using. He said, and if you don't have a treatment and recovery model on the back end, he said, the problem will never get better and crime will get worse, and drug use. And in Baltimore, drug use continued to get worse. Now, their infectious disease rate in the 90s did get a little better. There was some evidence of that, but their crime and drug use never got better. In fact, got worse. So that's the evidence. I mean,
why worry about Hep C and HIV if you're not going to your main goal isn't going to be to recover someone from drugs?
Well, I mean, if I've always said before too, if you die from an overdose and you don't have Hep C or HIV, I mean, I guess congratulations, right? You're dead. I mean, you haven't helped that person.
I just don't get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've talked to the people who have done the work, and they all agree, the ones who are rational about this, I think, that you have to have treatment built into this, and eventually you've got to stop using it, or you're not going to save the person.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to add, and for the Women's Health Center and or any of their proponents is, I would invite them to go ahead and do the other things that they've been talking about they're going to do in terms of harm reduction and what this program was going to be. They talked about things like, referral to other types of care, to mental health treatment, to wound care.
Oh, no, but the syringe service part of it, they will not budge on that part.
That's where the money comes from.
Yeah, because the money comes from the needles. So that's what I'm saying. Please, and do everything you were going to do but the needles.
But you can't use federal funds to buy the needles. So tell me how the needles, why are the needles such a big component of this? Why are they living and dying on that hill?
Well, you don't just get federal funds; you get grant money. And another example,
if you have needles,
the Canal Charleston Health Department, the first year was open and got permission to open, and we all supported it based on their model that they told us they were going to run, which they didn't. They had $5,000 or maybe $10,000 in grants locally from like the Kanawha County Commission. They were on track. They had about $300,000 to $500,000 in grants. Can't remember the number on year 2. And by year 3, they closed before year 3. But by year 3, they were on track for $1 million in outside funding, which wasn't federal money. So that shows how quickly their program accelerated, and people saw this. The people inside that, as Adam called it, industry, were like, holy cow. They went from $10,000 in year 1 to by year 3, they were going to have $1 million in funding. We can make a living off this. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm not saying, a lot of the people who volunteer for this are very good people. Maybe they don't know all the information or data, and, but their heart's in the right place. Some of the volunteers, but the people the people who are making a living off of it, totally different story.
I agree with that. And that's the two camps. Yeah. All right. So Adam, what about the let's move to a different subject. No less needing me. I want to bang my head against a wall or jump off a bridge, no less with this next topic. So the next item on the agenda was Chief Tyke Hunt and his, what would you call it? Sexual misconduct in his office, the involvement of the FBI and the West Virginia State Police. There was a resolution to open an independent outside investigation. Over here, I'm thinking there needs to be 2 investigations. There needs to be one investigation of what happened in Chief Hunt's office and what happened with the West Virginia State Police and the FBI. But then there also needs to be an investigation of the actual investigation. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would agree with that 100%. But unfortunately, the bill was just to call for an outside investigation,
right?
To what the police chief had done with, government issued, property.
Resources.
Yeah, and resources. So specifically, the illicit pictures of him with, a cell phone.
Yeah.
And, his police issued cell phone, and then, an invitation, for a woman to come visit him after hours at City Hall, where, supposedly, and, these aren't my words, he's pretty much said what happened, and the city attorney's pretty much agreed that the story collaborates.
Yes.
That, he got naked except for a T-shirt and began to lay on the floor and, tried to pull the woman on top of him twice.
Right. Nobody disputes that.
Yeah, nobody, has disputed that, and, that's how it went. And so the resolution said, well, we want an outside investigation, something not handled by the city of Charleston come in and do that.
And so Janine Rose Fagery said, it's just hanky-panky. It's just some hanky-panky. There's always going to be hanky-panky in the office.
I tell you what, if I did that kind of hanky-panky in this studio,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be working in this studio anymore.
That's right. And Bruce King said it was consensual. It actually was not consensual.
Well, I mean, there are aspects of their communications were consensual, but again, I mean, Bruce is a guy who, if I see him, I talk to him.
Yeah.
We don't hang out, but I would consider him to be a casual friend. I've always liked Bruce, and I know his family. But, I mean, he's so missed the mark on that. Bruce, if you listen to this, buddy, I'd say this to your face. I don't know what you were thinking. It doesn't matter if it's consensual. He was in his office, and he was using his city-issued cell phone. And this was amazing to me last night, how people didn't seem to comprehend this. We have a city handbook for regular city employees. It's 123 pages long. I checked before I came in. We have a completely separate City of Charleston Police Department Policies and Procedures Manual that's 359 pages long. Both of those manuals encompass this behavior, but one applies specifically to police officers, including the chief of police.
Right.
And to say that he can consensually do this, therefore, what's the big deal?
Right.
You cannot have consensual sex in City Hall or try to as a city employee. I mean, it's on its face.
It's a fireable offense.
On both of these policy manuals, you can't do that. You can't, in the manuals address sending things on your cell phone. You can't do that. It's expressly in there. It talks about levels of discipline and gives examples. So arguing that it's consensual, I wanted to
I wanted to pull my hair out. I couldn't believe I heard that.
I wanted to call Bruce and say, Bruce, what difference does it make if it was consensual? And then her claim that it wasn't in terms of him getting naked and pulling him on top of her. And Kevin Baker, the city attorney, Adams Wright, said on statewide radio that the allegations were corroborated and they both essentially agreed, and that's why they kept it in-house. So that means the city attorney admitted that Chief Hunt did something unwanted towards this woman while he was nude from the waist down, physically touched her.
And Chelsea Stillhammer asked about a phone policy, I think. And I think at the meeting, Kevin Baker said they didn't have one. Is that correct? Am I remembering that correct?
There's phone policies.
But he did at the meeting. He did not say that there were.
Yeah,
Can we get a copy of the not only the police manual but the employee manual?
I mean, I think they're both online.
Okay, we need to highlight those pages.
Well, and listen again. I want to say this again. I said this last time this came up. This has nothing to do with whether Tyke Hunt is innocent, guilty, good, or bad. Okay, this is about consistent and fair treatment of every city employee,
right? And
it's about whether another uniformed officer would have been treated the same way. And the city, based upon what it says were true allegations by this woman, gave him a self-imposed suspension allegedly of 3 days. And when I say allegedly, again, that's relevant at this point because we have people who have said that there was no communication within the Charleston Police Department that he was actually suspended as chief of police, which is also significant because if you look at the 359-page policy and procedural manual for Charleston Police, it spells out specific duties for the chief of police, and it specifically says in one of these pages I have in front of me that if he's not present, then the deputy chiefs assume command, and that the chain of command is supposed to know who their acting chief of police is.
That's right.
There are certain things only the chief of police can do. So if he was suspended, according to everybody within the police department,
knew about it.
Nobody knew about it, which again, that's not a criticism. You don't have to think I'm criticizing Tyke Hunt. It has nothing to do with him. It's
policy.
It's a blatant violation of their own policies, and it gives credence to the allegation that there was a cover-up of this last year.
And yet the mayor comes on a radio show here in Charleston and says all of these accusations are political against her.
I don't care what your politics are. Again, let's reframe this. Any listener who thinks that we're being a-holes for talking about this because it's a good administration, if this was the Danny Jones administration, you would have wanted heads to roll. And rightly so. I would have said, hey, you're exactly
right.
The chief of police shouldn't have gotten this treatment this way.
Misconduct is misconduct. I don't care who you are.
And the fact, I'll be real quick, the fact that the city council members, again, I think some of them are good people who don't want to rock the boat, want to get along. I get that, but you're not elected for that. And the fact that they didn't seem to comprehend that the chief of police is still held to the civil service standards of every uniformed police officer. If he were to resign or the mayor were to remove him as chief of police tomorrow, he goes back to his previous rank of lieutenant within the police department. He's not just gone.
Right.
So his civil service rank is still at issue. His certification is at issue. So he should have had the same professional standards review. Whether you like him or not has nothing to do with that. You should have had the same civil service review of any other uniformed officer who had done these exact same things.
And, quoting Danny Jones, or somewhat quoting Danny Jones, who on statewide radio said if this would happen under his administration, the chief wouldn't be chief anymore. He would
That's
go
right.
back to that position that he'd had before as lieutenant, but he couldn't be chief anymore.
It is impossible for me to believe that a regular uniformed officer could have done something like this in his patrol car, and then the other things that followed up afterwards, which were also as bad, if not worse, and kept his job. I think any regular patrol officer, it defies logic to think they would not have been fired.
And another officer was suspended for those same type of 3-day suspension for just making a TikTok video.
Right.
With his clothes on,
Right.
I might add.
Adam.
Yeah, so the heart of the bill from the proponents, and I do want to mention them by name because
Yes.
I really think you're sticking your neck out as a
That's
council
right.
member.
Let's-
If you're going
let's
up
give
against the
them the
chief
credit,
of
man.
police and the administration.
Yes.
So council members Shannon Snodgrass, Beth Kearns, and Pam Burka. I mean, I think they knew what they were doing. When they put their name on the resolution.
Were they the only three that voted for it?
No, there was a total of 5
Gianola.
votes.
Gianola voted for
Yeah.
it. He made it very clear, though, that he voted because he heard from his constituents, I think. I think that's what he said.
And then the other one was council member Frank Annie.
And Frank Annie voted for it.
And I do want to talk about Gianola's vote,
Yeah.
in a way that maybe many don't know about. As we were walking out, the mayor was talking with Councilmember Gianola, and I think he was trying to explain his vote. Like I
was.
missed the first
He
part.
was trying to explain
trying to
it
explain his vote
before
to the
he
mayor.
voted.
And the mayor, basically paraphrasing her, said, "Well, it was 21-5. You ought to have known." Basically
better.
telling him, basically knowing that. And I almost turned around, but we're media members. So we're not going to be part of the story. We're just going to cover it. In my mind, that's very insulting for a ward council member. First of all, for the executive branch to tell the legislative branch, what to do like that. But secondly, in his remarks, Councilmember Gianola said out front, I'm doing this because my constituents want me to.
Yeah.
He's not out there voting
And
for
I'm not
what
saying you did anything wrong. I'm just saying there needs to.
So,
my
he's
constituents want me
not
to find
there-
out.
Yeah, he's not there to vote, for what the city wants him to do or
Right.
the mayor wants him to do.
Right.
He's there to vote for his ward and his constituents.
I mean, it's disgusting. And you contrast that with Bruce King saying, "This is ridiculous. I can't believe we're even talking about this." Yeah, that's all anybody's ever talking about. That's all we've been talking about for a year and a half, right? I just cannot believe that he made that comment. And you're right. I mean, what does that say? Is that intimidation by Mayor Goodwin to say, next time you better get on board?
Well,
I mean-
there was probably some of that, or
Yeah.
telling him that, hey, you represent one ward. You're going to go up against the whole city. This is how you're going to be treated. I mean, I don't know any other way to take that.
Yeah. Well,
Unreal.
let me tell you another side effect of that, which I think unintended consequences. But the reason why the Professional Standards Division exists, or one reason, is again to set precedent and have consistency and continuity,
Right.
So that similar conduct gets similar punishment, and you know what's going to happen if you do something. Everyone's
Right.
treated the same. Well, now we have a standard set within the city who only refer this to HR for a uniformed
Right.
officer of that you do this kind of conduct, which is admitted to and agreed to. The city didn't dispute it that it happened. You get 3 days. So if I'm any uniformed officer
That's
in the city of
precedent now,
Charleston,
right?
that's now precedent. And I think the city and these city council people aren't thinking about things like
Right.
that. There's a bigger picture here. The next time a uniformed officer does something of this magnitude or even less and gets a 3-day suspension or a week or a 1-day suspension or a week suspension, whatever, the precedent is, wait a minute, you shouldn't be able to treat me like this. Look what you did for the chief. He's a uniformed officer as well. I mean, there are things like that.
Consequences.
There's a bigger picture here.
That's
And
right.
Anyone who thinks anyone's nitpicking this, the police policy and procedure manual, again, 359 pages, it goes through to the extent where officers can be disciplined if they don't properly take care of their equipment, if they violate locker policy, if they don't use the proper equipment that's designated by the department, if their grooming standards are wrong, if their hygiene is wrong, if their personal appearance is wrong. I mean, these are small things that they're all written down by rule. So it's supposed to be a highly organized and disciplined force. And, I think that the majority of those men and women are. But the precedent that's been set here, regardless of your feelings about politics
Says
or the people
something
involved,
different.
it just is
It was
not.
a very short-sighted vote.
It's not good for the
it's
department.
Very short-sighted.
It's
I
not
agree.
good.
Ron, we're going to bring you on here. We need to get a follow-up. And guys, this story is not going away. I'm just going to tell you, the Scoop Squad is on this.
Well, Kenny Bass was this. I've never seen this before.
That's right. We got to mention that. 10
10
seconds.
seconds.
Yep.
I have never seen an established member of the media ever, and for years I went to every city council meeting. I still watch a bunch of them. I've never seen an established member of the media come to a city council meeting and ask to be a public speaker and sign up like Kenny Bass did, because he is not getting the information he's requesting from the city.
Yeah.
And he essentially, if anyone thinks he wasn't sending a message, I don't speak for him. I've never talked to him about any of this stuff. But to me, that's a message of I'm still looking at stuff. And,
Oh, yeah.
and I think from his perspective, it seems more is coming. He signed up as a public speaker, as a
That
journalist.
was stunning. It really was.
I've
It
never
was,
seen that.
It was really
it was,
powerful.
It was bizarre to see a member of the media get up from the media table to go,
To go and
address the
speak.
public, and then come back to the media table.
And as
Crazy.
a 40-year media veteran, I've never seen that,
Yeah.
anything like that. And that's breaking the fourth wall,
Absolutely.
so to speak.
Yeah, in other
But
words,
you
you're
just
not
don't
giving
do
what I'm
that.
asking for, so I'm going to stand here and tell it to your face.
And ask you right here and make you
Right,
answer.
right.
Next time I'll make
and
you answer.
apparently
me.
there are rumblings of an overtime
Yeah.
scandal.
Yeah.
Hate to use
and
that
she,
term,
she
but
sure
I think there
ignored
is
him.
one.
She didn't even look at Kenny, did she? I don't think she even made eye
No,
contact.
we can't be premature about that, but that potentially, based upon what I've heard, word of mouth, I mean, potentially is going to be really, really significant. I don't want to comment on it until we know
Right.
more, but
Right.
it potentially
The rumblings are there.
But we got our eyes on you out there in City Hall.
it could dwarf these other issues we've talked about, frankly.
Yeah. All right, Ron, you want to give us a jail
because it
update?
involves money. Then
Yeah.
it gets serious.
I mean, I just can't. Okay, I can't go there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, we've been following the another crisis with the regional jails,
Yes.
and now that crisis has reached to the prison system itself. The prisons are for people who are, basically sentenced to long-term sentences.
Yes.
Whereas the regional jails are supposed to be holding points for the prisons and also for short term.
Yes.
In the old days, like on Andy Griffith, if somebody gets sentenced to 10 days or 30 days, they go to the jail.
Right.
And then, in the 80s and 90s, they came up with the regional jails.
Yeah.
Well, because of the deteriorating prison conditions and the overcrowding, the state has made the regional jails into mini prisons where people are there for a lot longer than they should be, which means there's been a lot of deferred maintenance because
Yes.
nothing's been done to keep them modernized. So lo and behold, on today, Tuesday, we'll probably release the show on Wednesday, but today, Governor Jim Justice and others are being sued for the conditions in the state's regional jails and
Really?
in the prisons. The lawsuit was filed in Southern District Court by Attorney Steve New, who I've known. I don't know if you know him, JB.
Several lawyers, but Steve
Yeah.
was the lead lawyer. It looks like I know Steve.
Yeah, it looks like he's representing the plaintiffs. Said part of the lawsuit is based, and I'm quoting from Metro News website, part of the lawsuit is based on information provided by current and former members of the Justice Administration who have given sworn depositions, including former Homeland Security Secretary Jeff Sandy, Corrections Commissioner Betsy Jividan. They said these conditions have existed for over a decade, the overcrowding in particular, the understaffing, while it got much better before the pandemic, has gotten a lot worse. So the lawsuit was filed on behalf of Mount Olive State Prison inmate Thomas Shepard and regional jail inmate Tyler Randall. So they cover both ends of the spectrum. 10,000 inmates are living in inhumane conditions. I mean, people that have worked there are telling me that people are in, you take like a hospital room,
Yeah.
maybe that's designed for one person. Some of those jail cells are about that size. So they're taking bunk beds and putting 4 prisoners on bunk beds to stay in order to fit them all in there. And these are the regional jails. And then when they're still overcrowding, they'll put them in sleeping in the floor. So they're basically,
And they could be there for up to a year. We've got reports
huge,
on people
they're
being there
going
for
through
as long as a
huge
year.
hardship. So that's going to be a total of about $300 and some million. There's $270 million that's of maintenance that's been deferred. But that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. I have a gentleman who has worked in the system who's telling me basically there's a mental health crisis as well, and so we're going to get into that in future shows. It's not going to be pretty.
No, it's not.
I'm talking with a lady pretty soon to give me more information who is on the mental health side of the jail and prison system. But the holding tanks, they'll put people in these little, I would call it a 3x3 holding cell, like a porta potty. That's the size of unit they're in while they wait for processing. They can't access a bathroom. They can't get out. They won't be let out.
Did you send me a picture
Yeah,
of that?
I sent you the
It looked
picture.
like a phone booth.
Yeah, it's basically what it was, a 1960s era
Yeah.
wooden phone booth.
People were stunned at the increase. How many more people are in the regional jails? They're how many times? 50% over capacity?
I think they're at double capacity.
Double capacity. People did not know that. It's shocking.
The original plan was to build 12 regional jails. They only built 10. So there's part of the problem.
This all originated. Real quick history. This same argument. It's like history's repeating itself. They were supposed to build regional jails decades ago. We eventually closed down Moundsville because a judge rendered or ordered that Moundsville had inhumane conditions
Right.
there, which then led to the creation of Mount Olive. So we had a short-term solution, and now we're back because of the increase in jail population. And your other guest here, Ms. Dollison, one of the things you talked about with the drug stuff, there's probably, I don't know, I think it's probably safe to say 80 to 90% of the people who were incarcerated have some relationship to a drug crime, whether they're selling, using something for some reason, commit a violent crime in connection with drugs. I mean, there's a drug connection to a lot of this. So that's a big issue. Until we get a handle on this drug problem, we're never going to solve the jail issue. And Ron, this is something that Governor Justice inherited.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that his administration doesn't
Oh,
pay
no.
attention to it. They should, but he inherited this. It's existed over multiple administrations.
It took a long time to get to this point.
It's going to come to a head probably for the next governor, whoever is elected to that position. This train's coming hard and fast, and it's a tough problem to solve.
Well, I think that this just makes the August 29th event at the Capitol, Intercessors for America,
absolutely.
even more relevant.
Well, I will get into the mental health aspect of
Yeah.
the problems with the prisons and the regional jails. I have more people to interview.
Let's do it.
I'll be back in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Hopefully with some of the folks are reluctant to come, to be, especially to use their name, but also to have their voices used. But,
Well, they probably need whistleblower protection.
right.
I was at Mount Olive about a month or two ago, and I was talking to some employees when I was there, and it's legitimately bad. I'm not blaming anybody, but it's a bad situation.
I had a relative there who spent 10 years, and I'll get his impressions of that as well.
Yeah,
So
they're
you-
massively understaffed, massively.
So you're going to do some research while you're
I'll
on
do
vacation?
more research,
Okay, good.
spend some time talking to more people, because the more people I talk to, they refer me to other people.
Yeah.
There's also a crisis of police brutality in parts of this county also, and I'll be delving into that as well.
All right.
So if you're listening, Clendenin, there's
More to come.
probably more to come and more than you want us to see.
Well, I don't know where to go from here.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave you speechless on that.
I am
what else is there to
speechless.
say? Talk about Ukraine. I don't know.
I mean, whew,
I've been to
this is heavy.
Ukraine.
Well, I just
it's
want to say
Not quite as bad there as it is here in
thank
some
you,
cases.
Adam. Adam was there with me last night for 4 hours.
Oh, we were the.
Oh, man, that's brutal.
It
We-
was brutal.
we were
and
the only people
Yeah, we were the only
left.
media outlet that stayed the entire time.
That's oppressive. I mean, it is. I've covered the legislature. I covered it for 5 years. I
Yeah.
covered not only the interim meetings, but the committee and subcommittee meetings, and how tedious those things can be.
Yeah.
Cannot be.
Yeah,
I mean,
cannot be
it's hard to
over-exaggerated.
describe.
It's hard to describe. It's very hard to describe. I don't want to try. And JB, thank you for coming.
Thanks for inviting me.
Donna, thank you for coming. You and your husband.
Yeah,
I hope
thanks for
that
your
you'll come
story.
back. I would love to hear more of your story and give you an entire scoop.
Yeah,
Entire three
congrats
scoops.
on your recovery.
Yes, I did want to say that, and I meant to say that. And I have said this before. People who have recovered from addiction are some of the bravest and hardest working and dedicated people. You're my heroes, and I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll get you in contact with other press people who'd be interested in your story.
Absolutely. And so, hey, Adam, you come back with me next week?
I'll come back whenever you invite me.
JB,
Depends on what you're talking about.
okay.
Well, what
All
do you
right,
think
ever
we'll be
the
talking
lawyer.
about?
All right, we will see. We will talk to Charleston, West Virginia next week.
Yeah, thank
All right.
you, and thank
Thanks
you to
for
our
tuning in.
sponsors,
Yep.
Americans for Prosperity, Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, T Graphics on Buchanan Street, Eggplant on Bridge Road, call Ditto Marketing, and we appreciate J.B. Akers, attorney at law.
Yes,
He was our
Akers
unpaid,
Law.
Friend of the show.
unpaid legal counsel here.
Best attorney in
You
town.
get the advice you pay for, Ron.
I've got stuff here. I could start my own law firm listening to you.
All right, we will talk at you next week, Charleston, West Virginia. Thank you. Bye.
If you would like to tie your business with this popular podcast, you can contact me, Ron Hughes, to advertise at ron.hughes, ron.hughes, at wvradio.com, or you could call me at 304-342-8131.
Reckless big government policies are putting the American dream out of reach. We all know Washington is broken, but it doesn't have to be. Senator Joe Manchin could be part of the solution if he stood up for West Virginia values. Instead, he voted with Joe Biden on the Inflation Reduction Act, which led to higher taxes, trillions in new spending, and tens of thousands of new IRS agents. Tell Joe Manchin, Mountaineers want real, common sense solutions. To learn more, visit prosperityispossible.com. Paid for by Americans for Prosperity.
Our sponsors include Chris Walters at Integrity Insurance, offering auto, home, life, business, workers' compensation, and pet insurance, which is health insurance for your dogs and cats that covers those specialty foods, illness, surgeries, medications. You can find them at 16 Capitol Street in Charleston, and you can call them at 346-9181. Find them at www.iigwv.com. We're also sponsored by Eggplant on Bridge Road, anything but ordinary. Go to eggplantshop.com. Also by T Graphics on the west side, 312 Buchanan Street. tgraphics.com for screen printing and embroidery. They've been around since 1984. Call them at 345-4816. Also, our latest sponsor is Call Ditto Marketing. Keep your brand moving. Call ditto.com. Rebroadcast, retransmission, or transcription is not permissible without the expressed approval of Scoop Squad Truth Squad. Copyright 2023. The opinions on Scoop Squad Truth Squad are those of the hosts and the guests, and not those of WVRC Media. Copyright 2023.